fire raged for 3 days. Thick black smoke swallowed the skyline of a textile factory in rural Sichuan. At the center of it all was a 22-year-old worker, owed just 800 yuan or roughly $110. When every legal channel failed him, he set the factory ablaze. To Beijing, it was a criminal act. To the internet, he became a martyr.
With just 800 yuan, this young man burned down a factory worth tens of millions. Because he no longer trusted anyone. Maybe he tried to ask for his wages, but it was hopeless. So he fought for fairness in his own way. For just 800 yuan in unpaid wages, a young man lit up the dark night sky with a fire that millions saw as justice. It wasn't the first time. Last year, someone drove a forklift straight through them because no one paid him. If you run a business, but can't pay your workers, maybe you shouldn't be running one at all.
Here's the real story. This wasn't a spark in the dark. It was a warning shot, signaling a much deeper collapse that China's leadership can no longer hide. On May 20, 2025, in the mountainous county of Pingshan, a young factory worker reached his breaking point. He had been denied his wages for months, just 800 yuan. Repeated visits to local authorities yielded nothing. Doors closed, phones unanswered, complaints deleted online. The factory's accountant, reportedly related to the boss, untouchable, unapologetic. So, in a final act of rage and despair, he attacked the accountant and set several workshops on fire. The flames devoured the factory, but online something else caught fire. Chinese social media erupted. Thousands hailed him as the people's hero. Many offered donations to his family. One post read, 800 yuan is pocket change to a boss, but survival money to a worker. Another said, he burned a factory to wake up a nation. The incident struck a nerve, not because of how rare it was, but because of how common it's becoming. Beneath the smoke was a truth the government didn't want exposed. Wage theft is rampant. Legal recourse is meaningless. And across China's collapsing industrial zones, anger is boiling over. This wasn't just arson. It was the first visible crack in a silent nationwide rebellion. What triggered this rage? Look deeper, and you'll find the answer in China's factories. Once called the world's workshop, today, they're crumbling under the weight of global realignment. Since 2018, the U.S.-China trade war has imposed waves of tariffs on Chinese goods. While policymakers in Beijing promised resilience, the damage was already compounding. Now, in 2025, the pain is no longer theoretical. China's industrial output slowed sharply to 6.1% in April, down from 7.7% just a month earlier, a sudden deceleration not seen since the COVID crisis. Real estate investment, a major driver of local employment, collapsed by 10.3% in just the first 4 months of the year. And despite temporary tariff cuts, an estimated 4 to 6 million jobs remain at risk, according to Reuters, as the 30% baseline tariff remains in place on many Chinese exports. Behind those numbers are shuttered workshops, unpaid workers, and silent production lines. In manufacturing hubs like Dongguan and Foshan, small suppliers have begun collapsing en masse. Orders from the West are drying up, and internal consumption is too weak to compensate. Yet Beijing insists the economy is on the rebound. The numbers say otherwise. So do the strikes, the protests, and the mounting acts of desperation. The fire in Sichuan was not just a cry for unpaid wages. It was the product of a collapsing system where workers are no longer workers. They're liabilities in a broken machine. Meet Zhang Chong, a 32-year-old textile worker. Zhang once ran 2 machines in a humming factory just outside Chengdu. He worked night shifts, bent over steaming threads, earning enough to send money back to his parents in the countryside. Then came the layoffs. His factory slashed staff by 2/3, then delayed salaries for months. Zhang lost 2,000 yuan in performance bonuses the company claimed it couldn't afford. When he demanded answers, the manager laughed. If you don't like it, leave. He tried, but local labor offices ignored him. His complaint on social media was deleted within an hour. He's not alone. Across provinces like Hunan, Shaanxi, and Inner Mongolia, workers are staging sit-ins, locking factory gates, even threatening suicide just to recover unpaid wages. Videos from these protests rarely stay online for more than minutes before state censors delete them. One textile worker described it bluntly: "Working in China today is like gambling. If your boss pays you, you're lucky. If he doesn't, nobody will help." The anger is not abstract. It's personal. These are not revolutionaries, they're fathers, daughters, husbands. And their pain isn't caused by foreign sanctions. It's born from inside. A system that protects capital, silences dissent, and leaves the most vulnerable behind. The fire in Pingshan wasn't the beginning. It was the first flame we were allowed to see. By the third night, the factory in Pingshan was a skeleton of ash and steel. But it wasn't the building that burned. It was something far more dangerous: the illusion of control. In a country obsessed with the word stability, this one act, by one unpaid worker, sent shockwaves across a fragile economy. It exposed how thin the boundary has become between industrial discipline and chaos. Within days, copycat incidents followed. In Guizhou, 300 workers stormed a brick plant after abrupt closure notices left them unpaid. In Shenzhen, electronics workers staged a sit-in inside company offices, refusing to leave until police forcibly removed them after midnight. In Inner Mongolia, miners blocked roads, demanding back pay and social insurance. None of these stories made national news. None were officially acknowledged. But together, they painted a picture of a workforce pushed to the edge, not by foreign forces, but by domestic neglect. These are not isolated eruptions. They are pressure valves from a system that no longer bends, it fractures. And here's the irony. The Chinese Communist Party, long praised for managing economic miracles, is now losing control not because of outside sanctions, but because of its refusal to confront internal rot. The fire in Sichuan was not spontaneous combustion. It was the consequence of slow collapse, fueled by fear, silenced by policy, and ignited by desperation. Behind every smoke plume in China, there's a pattern. A video goes viral. Public sympathy surges. Then silence. The Pingshan fire followed the script. Posts were scrubbed from Weibo. Search terms like 800 yuan, wage theft, and factory fire were blacklisted. Media outlets were instructed to follow official narratives. But this pattern reveals more than censorship. It reveals fear. Beijing doesn't fear arson. It fears the reason behind it. Because what happens when millions realize their struggle is not unique, but systemic? Consider this. China no longer publishes youth unemployment figures. Since mid-2023, the number has quietly disappeared from official reports. In its last release, over 20% of Chinese youth were jobless, and independent estimates suggest the real figure may have exceeded 40%. So the metric was erased. Not improved, erased. Factories are failing. Real estate giants are defaulting. Local governments are drowning in hidden debt. Yet the state's primary concern remains the narrative. Rather than reform exploitative labor practices or support small manufacturers, the party has prioritized message control, dismantling protest networks, arresting organizers, and flooding social media with positive stories. And herein lies the collapse, not of GDP, but of trust. When a nation deletes its own pain, it doesn't heal. It metastasizes. The worker in Sichuan didn't just ignite a fire. He lit a match in a room full of gas fumes, and everyone watching knows more flames are coming. The factory has fallen silent. The smoke has cleared, but the anger remains. Unspoken, unreported, unresolved. In China, 800 yuan was enough to light a fire, not just on factory floors, but in the minds of millions trapped in silence. A system designed to project strength is now defined by fear of free speech, of open records of its own workers. Not long ago, Beijing promised common prosperity. Today, it censors unemployment data and jails protesters asking for their paychecks. So here's the question. If one man with nothing to lose can shake the narrative, what happens when thousands do the same? What burns next? What does stability mean in a country where truth itself is flammable?